From the Ticats Audio Network, this is the CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil.
The loaded BC Lions pull a complete no-show. Stampeders head coach Dave Dickenson offers a forceful ultimatum. Do offensive linemen get no respect? And oh Lord, Tre Ford has been set free. Hallelujah, it's time for the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network. I'm Bubba O'Neil. Thank you so very much for being a part of the best CFL podcast that features the top broadcasters, analysts, and columnists from all across the country. On the pod this week, he is the sidekick to our boy Mike Hogan on the Argonauts broadcast on TSN 1050, and he's the creator of the X's and Argonauts broadcast and these podcasts. Ben Grant, thank you so much for joining us.
Always happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, if there's sports activity going on in the province of Saskatchewan, he's got it covered. He is the sports editor of the Regina Leader Post, Taylor Shire. Always appreciate your participation on the CFL this week.
Thanks for the invite.
As we like to do, we got a ding, ding, ding sound, that rookie alert. He is the host of the Avry Sports Show, Avry Lewis-McDougall. I'm all pumped up to hear from you. Thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here. First time. I'm fired up.
You should be fired up. You should be fired up. All right, guys, let's get right to it. There were some just wild games and results and crazy things that happened last week in the Canadian Football League. We'll start here, down 22-6. At home to the Argonauts, Stampeders head coach Dave Dickenson tells a reporter on QE Calgary at halftime, quote, "If you want to play for this team, you better show up in the second half." And he said so rather forcefully. Well, they certainly did. The Stamps responded and pulled out a 27-23 victory. Top billing to you, Ben Grant, because you called all the action. Stampeders win or Argos collapse?
It's a little bit of both. I think the Stampeders did. I know that's not like the answer you want necessarily, but they
no.
I know, but that's what happened. It's a combination of things that went on. The Argos kind of stalled. They just they stopped playing. The defense was still there, but Calgary converted plays. There are a couple of plays that maybe could have changed the outcome of the game, and those were when the Stampeders had the ball. But ultimately, it's got to come down to the Argos scoring more than a single point in the second half. Like with all the other analysis that you can do of what went wrong on the other side of the ball and how Calgary played well and everything else, you can't expect to win a football game when you have 1 point in the second half. And that's what happened to Toronto. So to me, that's probably the biggest thing is Toronto's got to take the blame because you just can't have the scoreboard look that way. But yeah, Calgary had played 6 straight quarters of terrible football. And I think, coach is right to come out there and call out his players. He's like, look, I can only do so much. And we never question him as like an X's and O guy or a strategy guy or a motivator. And yet there he was in that situation where his players just hadn't come out and shown anything for 6 quarters. And they did show up in the second half.
Taylor, I was surprised to hear Dave Dickenson. He was always, I know he gets hot on the sidelines at the officials, but to hear him get that hot at the local media, did that surprise you?
Well, no, because they were playing so poorly in the first half, and I assume he went in and said the same thing to his locker room, right? We assume that would have been his message to his guys at halftime. If he's going to tell the media that, he better tell the players that. So where there's a will, there's a way type of second half for the Stampeders, and I just think that comes down to good coaching. And Dave isn't a guy who's going to say that every week. He's going to say that when it's necessary. And when he talks like that, as a player, as a spectator of the league, you're going to listen because he doesn't really always pull that out of his back pocket every week. So when a guy like Dave Dickenson does say that, you better be listening and you better respond if you're one of his players because you very well might not be around the next week if you don't show up in the second half. And I think all the Stampeders did. That was a great second half by them. They got once they got rolling, you could just see the momentum turn into their favor. And like I said, I think that comes down to good coaching.
Avry, did you see this coming?
You know what? Seeing the way the first half ended, I was surprised, but I'm not surprised to see Calgary respond. This is a team that had 21 fourth quarter points. And first of all, winning in Calgary is so tough to do no matter who you are. So it's good to see and show that Calgary can still hang with the top teams in the CFL, Bubba.
Yeah, I was just really surprised at the fact that the Argonauts, who I thought looked so good, Avry, they just seemed to I don't know, like everything that was working stopped working.
Yeah, it's true. And you saw Calgary get pressure on you saw Calgary get pressure on the quarterback. You saw Calgary clean a lot of things up. Like I mentioned beforehand, winning in Calgary historically is such a tough thing to do. So good on them for defending home turf. Really good on them to defend home turf in a tough place to play, no matter who you are.
And especially if you're the Toronto Argonauts, I think they're now 1-9 since 2014 in Calgary, which is not a great record, obviously. But it goes back to, like, Coach Dinwiddie after the game was really upset with himself. He felt he didn't call plays well. He only called 3 running plays for Kadeem Carey, one of the best running backs in the league. Carey's been lighting it up this season. This is not last year's Kadeem Carey where he wasn't at 100% health. He's looked fantastic. And in the second half, you've got this big lead, and yet they went out there, and it's hard for me to complain because I would also complain if they went out with the big lead and only ran the football too. But there's got to be a little bit more balance there. You've got Carey run the football more than 3 times in that second half. Like, see if you can take some pressure off this young quarterback who they've clearly made adjustments for in the second half.
Taylor, here's the thing. I was maybe the coaching staff, maybe even the players, because this was the Sunday game. And they're saying to themselves, like, the top dogs in the West have all lost. Like, this puts them, Calgary, right in the mix, I would believe. They had to believe this.
Yeah, and obviously that was some motivation. I still think we're a little bit too early in the season to talk about playoff races, but you do got to think, by Labor Day, if Calgary's not in a position of maybe competing for that 3rd spot, then they're going to fall off. I don't think they're in the upper echelon. I still don't know where Winnipeg is. That's a complete. I have no idea what to make of Winnipeg this year type of answer. But I think they're going to still compete for a playoff spot when it's all said and done. Saskatchewan and BC are obviously good, so you don't have to necessarily panic if you're Calgary quite yet, but you have to start stacking those wins together because you don't want to be out of it by Labor Day. So I'm sure they did talk about that. Nobody's ever out of it by September in terms of the playoff race. Edmonton could make a miraculous comeback. But yeah, when you look at the standings, I think, if you're a Stampeder, you do want to at least keep pace. And especially when those other teams lose above you, you can make up ground, right?
Avery, the thing is with this Stamps team, I don't know who to trust or what to trust, because I see what I see in the first half of that game, and then I saw what I saw in the second half, and I don't know what kind of team they are. Are they a good team? Are they just flaky? Are they a bad team? What do you think?
I mean, I think they're still good. I mean, are they a team of 5-6 years ago that was dominating the Western Division, getting to Grey Cups consistently like they did with Bo Levi? No, not anymore. But I still think they're a team that can make the playoffs, make some noise. I mean, heck, we saw Jake Mayer threw for almost 300 yards, had a pretty good game. So I think Calgary is still a decent football club. Are they bad? No, not at all in my mind.
Ben?
It'd be nice if they could get some more consistent play. We've been saying this for a while now, but more consistent play from Jake Mayer. Because like Avery said, like he had a really nice game, but most of that came in the second half where he suddenly started hitting his receivers downfield. I actually really liked what I saw from Mayer in the second half, because the criticism on him, not just this year, but really since he got going in Calgary, is that he's afraid to push the ball downfield. There's a number of quarterbacks in that same boat. I think Cameron Dukes also receives that kind of criticism. And Mayer really did take some shots, and he was pushing the football. He was taking chances, and his receivers rewarded him. They made plays. So, if you get that Jake Mayer, and Calgary's seen that Jake Mayer a few times, whenever you see it, those 300-yard games from Mayer, you're like, oh, yeah, there he is. This is the guy. But then he sometimes will follow that up with a performance that has you questioning whether or not he has a future in Calgary. So it must be frustrating as a Stampeders fan just not to know which side of the coin you're getting, the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde of Jake Mayer in Calgary.
Taylor, is this down to the quarterback, and this is why this team is so seemingly inconsistent?
Yes and no. I think Jake's play has a lot to do with their inconsistency. I just think they're a very middle average team. I don't think they're a great team. I don't think they're a terrible team. They're just a very average team. They have some good players, but they, like Avery said, they don't have those players, those leaders that they had, a decade ago anymore. They just have a bunch of average players. They're not quite where BC and a lot of teams have to go through this. Not every team can be great, right? So I think Calgary's an average team. They might squeak into the playoffs. I don't see it. I don't see Jake Mayer being a guy who's going to go win a Grey Cup type of quarterback, right? I think he's an average quarterback, and And he has flashes, he has great games, and then, like you said, he'll go out and have a few interceptions and throw for 110 yards type of games the following week.
Mr. Shire, I'll come right back to you on this. You saw it before your very eyes. I don't know what your expectations were going into this contest, but lo and behold, finally, quarterback Tre Ford gets the start for the Edmonton Elks in Regina against one of the tough, at least run defenses in the league, and they respond with a 42-31 win. And some would say that score flattered the Riders. And this was in Regina. Do you see this as a flash-in-the-pan victory for the Edmonton Elks franchise, or are we about to see a big turnaround there?
You know what? I don't want to say I saw it coming, but I did see it coming. Edmonton made the switch to Tre Ford. You could just sense a little bit of spark within the organization. The Riders are coming off a loss to the Montreal Alouettes the week prior. I don't want to say Saskatchewan took Edmonton lightly because of their record. I honestly think the records were out the window and they knew what they were going to get from Tre Ford, but I still think they were kind of caught off guard with not only his play, but Javon Leake getting the start at running back. You saw how good he is returning the ball for several years in Toronto, but now he comes in and he gets the start at running back for Kevin Brown, and I think Saskatchewan completely was caught off guard by his not only quickness, but shiftiness. And I mean, he had 169 yards along the ground, and they had 276 total yards, and Saskatchewan's run defense gave up an average of 48 yards per game prior. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think Edmonton is a better team with Tre Ford. I think even a better team with Javon Leake than they were with McLeod Bethel-Thompson and Kevin Brown. So I think Edmonton not only showed that they're a better team, but to the Riders, but they showed that they're going to be a better team and they're going to make some noise in the second half to the entire CFL. Saskatchewan, I don't think it was necessarily a collapse. I just think it was maybe that was a flash in the pan on the negative side where, hey, we're going to learn from these type of mistakes. They still have some playmakers. They still have a good team, but they are dealing with a lot of injuries too. So I think it was Edmonton showing to everybody that they're here to make some noise in the second half. And I think Saskatchewan, it was sort of a kick in the pants that they need to smarten up here in the next few games.
Avery, jump on to what Taylor's saying there, like the injury thing, like let's not dismiss that. Like Anthony Lanier not being on the defensive line that's a big difference. Like Saskatchewan is so good at stuffing the run this season. They're really tough to run against. And without that same group in the middle, it is, and you had a bit of a banged up Riders defense anyway. That is something you have to consider. That's not all of it. There was a lot of other elements there, but I don't think we can dismiss an absence like that.
Avery, you're close to the situation.
Yes.
What's the feeling in Edmonton?
I mean, after the game against Hamilton, where fans were literally chanting, "We want Tre, we want Tre," they're justified now in seeing how Tre played in that game late and in this game against Saskatchewan. It baffles me as to why this team didn't play Tre earlier when this team was only, say, 0-3, 0-4, as opposed to 0-7. Now you're 1-7 now, and yes, I know it's early to make the playoff spot, but you have a slight chance that I think get a crossroads spot as long as Tre is still there under center. Tre extends plays, his arm looked well, and the running backs give the ball to Javon Leake, and good things happen. So Edmonton right now, they're hot, I think, in my mind, guys.
Oh, hold on, Avery. I need to go back to you on this. Now we can talk, right? Because Chris Jones is gone now, right? And I know everyone wants to hold back a little bit because we got a little respect for Chris Jones in some ways. But why didn't they play the guy? Like, I mean, in your opinion, I'm sure he wasn't about to give up the reasons why.
No, in my opinion, Chris Jones wanted more of a traditional drop-back quarterback. That's what he wanted under center. He wanted that kind of guy. He didn't like how Tre was really more a guy who would run after the first read. He wanted more drop-back quarterback, a little bit a bigger quarterback. Tre's on the smaller side of the quarterback. And MBT fit that mold more for Chris Jones than Tre Ford did. But I'm glad to see him now get a chance under Jarius Jackson because last year, Tre Ford got Edmonton some wins, got them their first home win in what felt like 50 years, and now he's gets them a big road win in Saskatchewan. I don't know how you don't give Tre a few more starts this season to hopefully save their season here in 2024.
The mistake was really made in the offseason for the Elks, because I think it's once McLeod started playing this season, he actually played really well. Like until I guess there was some sort of injury a couple weeks ago where his play really dropped off, and then they ended up sitting him, and that's why Ford ended up getting this opportunity. But Edmonton probably should have just gone with Ford from the get-go. We saw him play really well last year, and you have to say, as Chris Jones and that whole coaching staff, Jarius Jackson, like it's their job to develop these guys. And so you saw those flashes and what Tre Ford could do on the field. You know, we saw him play at Waterloo. We know what a special player he is. And they should really have said, this is his season. We're going to put all the pieces around him and use all that extra money to bolster the offensive line and everything else that was needed, and gone into the season with Tre Ford as the number one. Now, they didn't do that. They brought in McLeod Bethel-Thompson, who I really like as a quarterback. But if they were going to go that way, then one of two things. Either you have to still make Tre Ford part of it. And I don't mean just as a runner, because that's dismissing Tre Ford's value. He's got that dual threat ability. He's a great passer, a smart decision maker. He's got accuracy. But then force defenses to prepare for two very different guys. Not necessarily platooning, but maybe you don't know when either one of them is going to be in there. And I think that's a situation that would frustrate opposing defenses. Yeah,
but McLeod says he doesn't like to have his rhythm interrupted.
I know, and no, that's what, like, no quarterback wants to be taken off the field, but it's not McLeod's team either, and you have to, as a coach and as a general manager too, like, this is something that he should have addressed early on, because you can't have someone as talented as Tre Ford just sitting on the bench. That does you no good as a team. And let's not forget how close this team was for those first 5 games. Like, if football were only a 59-minute game, Edmonton would be sitting in a playoff position right now. They were a really good football team for 59 minutes and then found a way to just completely unravel over those first few games. So again, it's great to see Tre Ford finally get a shot. I think it's going to be tough to take him off the field now, even when McLeod Bethel-Thompson gets back to full strength. How can you not? Because Tre Ford has shown that he wins football games. He's won all of Edmonton's games essentially since Chris Jones started this post-pandemic.
Taylor, the crazy thing is, to me, in the TSN cameras, they kept shooting the sidelines. It seemed like a different place. And of course, that happens when you're winning. But we did see Edmonton leading games. It seems like he lifted the aura. And you did talk about Leak and the fact that he had incredible success running the football. But isn't that just part of the Tre Ford package? Is that because of his dual threat, the arm, the legs, that it can open up things for your receivers and your other running backs?
Yeah, 100%. I think the dual threat ability of Tre Ford is a big reason why they were able to win that game. The Riders not only had to, respect Ford's running ability, but because of that opened up spots for Leak, right? To basically run right through the Riders defense. I think he had 2 touchdown runs of over 50 yards, right? So not only Tre Ford's playing ability gave Edmonton a spark, but I just think the change that they made and bringing him in, everyone is going to kind of bond together in the locker room when you have your young quarterback playing. Everybody in that locker room, I think, knows what Tre Ford can do, and they were excited to see him, to play alongside him as well. So I think it was a little bit of the sort of intangibles, off-field spark that they got, and like I said earlier, Tre Ford, I think, is a better quarterback than McLeod Bethel-Thompson when you look at the entire package. So playmaking ability, yes, obviously that was a big reason why they won the game. But like I said, the intangibles off the field, I think, was a big reason as well.
To that end, if you there's a piece that I'm working on right now and looking at, like, taking a close look at how Ford affected Leak, because I think there's really something there. First of all, I think Leak is not known as a middle runner. Like, he's going back all the way to Maryland in his time there. He's always been an outside guy, getting him on jet sweeps and things like that. He's not ever really looked that comfortable running the middle. And so I think that probably wasn't something Saskatchewan was looking for. But if you watch the way that Saskatchewan's defense plays Leak because of Ford, there's something there. The guys playing contain, they were really disciplined in their lanes. And you see, like, defensive ends are the best athletes in the league. They're just different human beings out there on the end, and they'll cheat. They'll line up head up on the tackle sometimes, even though they've got contain responsibility, because then they can help out inside. And that happens on almost every run play. Not against Tre Ford. They were lined up really wide on the outside. They were blitzing from contain. And that really opened up some opportunities in the middle, because you weren't getting this condensed bunch on those middle runs. And then even those D tackles, sometimes, instead of firing off the ball, even on run blitzes, they would pop up because they want to see what's happening in the field. And that's something that was made possible because of Tre Ford. They're nervous about Tre Ford. And I don't think so much because of his threat to run. I think it's because of his threat to escape the pocket and potentially make big plays. Because when Tre Ford escapes the pocket, he's still looking to pass first, but he's looking downfield to now make a big play. He's putting corners in conflict where they've got to decide, do I come up and make a play on Ford, or do I stick with my coverage? And whatever way you choose, it's lose-lose. Ford's going to burn you on that. And they just didn't want to be in that situation. So it completely affected that run defense of the Riders in my mind. And it's just those little subtle details there. But I think the biggest reason that Leak had such a massive day is that the rest of that Riders defense is thinking Ford first, not thinking, let's stop Javon Leak on the run.
Well, I'm frightened for defenses going forward. Their game planning and certainly film study is going to be incredibly important, but Ford's such a wild card that you just never know. Sticking with the quarterbacks, Taylor, that's 3 losses in their last 4 games for the Riders. Help me out there.
You're right, 2 in a row.
Okay, so is this going to force back or at least maybe make the
I know where you're going.
Well, no. Does this make them the Corey may say, "Hey, Trevor, are you ready to go?" Like, does it make it imperative? Like, we got to get this our starter back in there right now.
It doesn't make it imperative. Shea Patterson has played well in relief of Trevor Harris, who's been out for the last 5 games. Shea Patterson hasn't lost them any games. I don't think he's necessarily won them any games. He hasn't stole the show, so it's not. I don't think we have that quarterback controversy in Saskatchewan where the Riders have to say, "Oh, we want to see more of Shea Patterson. We maybe shouldn't play Trevor Harris." I don't think we're there yet. Trevor Harris is still the uncontested starter. Like I said, Patterson has played well, but when it's time for Trevor to be back, when he's fully healthy, fully recovered, it'll be his team. Harris has been practicing this week for the first time since his injury. It's such a short week, though. They only have basically 1 full practice before they go to Ottawa on Thursday. So I don't see any way that Harris would play this week, getting basically a half of a practice in because he didn't practice. He didn't get many reps on the first day. And then there was a close practice on the second day. So they just had a short walkthrough on Monday. So to me, this feels like sort of a prep for next week, which I expect Trevor to get full reps next week as the starter in practice leading into that game against the Alouettes. So they didn't have to rush him back, like I said, because Shea was playing okay. But it's a time where Trevor's back healthy. He's done his full stint on the 6-game injury list, so the salary cap stuff doesn't have to come into effect. He's done his full time. He's going to be back when he's healthy, when he's ready, and because it's his team.
Guys, I was having some fun. I like to look through maybe like yourselves, look through the statistics and just see some weird things every once in a while. And the Tiger Cats offensive line, they've surrendered only 11 sacks all season long. For Bo Levi Mitchell, who certainly appreciates that. And he's been putting up some pretty good numbers despite the Tiger Cats record. Avry, do you feel like the offensive line is the most underappreciated, disrespected in some cases aspect of football?
I really do at times because there's no really quantifiable stat to show how a line is. I mean, it'll stats like a receiver in terms of catching a ball, touchdown passes. So people have a hard time assessing what an offensive line really can do. But I agree. And you mentioned, Bubba, the 11 sacks allowed. That's big because for a team to have any level of success or get any level of wins, you need a quarterback to be upright. And we've seen with Bo Levi Mitchell, he's been upright. Even though the wins haven't come in bunches, he still has thrown for 18 touchdown passes. And that's big. To make sure he can throw his passes, he has to be on his feet at all times.
Ben, you're a big X's and O's guy.
Yeah, O-line is the most important position in football after quarterback. You've got quarterback's the biggest thing, and even going back to what Taylor was just saying in terms of Harris and looking at Patterson, if you find me a backup quarterback with continued success in the league, it's tough. Montreal's found a way to do stuff like that, but it is a really tough thing to do. Quarterback play is such an important factor. If you've got a starter, you've got a chance. You can make the playoffs. You can make some noise in the playoffs. If you don't, then yeah, you have no hope. And look at last season for more evidence of that. But after quarterback, offensive line is the number one thing, because an offensive line can make an average quarterback look great, but they can even make a star quarterback look like something's wrong. And take a look at the first few games in Winnipeg, people questioning Zach Collaros and saying, what's wrong with Zach? Zach Collaros didn't change. He's not a different guy. It's not like he forgot how to play football, but he wasn't getting protection. He wasn't getting the same protection that he had been over this last few years where he's been on fire. It really does alter things. And for Hamilton, they've had some consistency now, especially in the middle. Like I love their play from that sort of guard center combo through the middle of that offensive line. The whole unit's been playing well, but it's a position based on communication and familiarity, and you have to trust the guy next to you, because it's not only your team's success, it's like your own physical safety is in the hands of the guy next to you, and there's got to be that bond there. And I think Revenberg, Beard, Woodmansey, like that sort of a trio in the middle has been playing really good football. They can still improve in terms of their run blocking, but I think that's far less important in the CFL. Their pass protection is pretty close. It's getting close to elite right now, and that is what has led to a little bit of a resurgence from Bo Levi-Mitchell. I know there were a lot of people doubting him this season, and he quieted a lot of those people with his play, but it starts with protection. They can make Bo Levi-Mitchell look very good as long as they keep him upright.
Taylor, it's almost not fair, because the receiver can say, when he's renegotiating his contract, he say, well, look how many catches I had. You targeted me this many times. The running back can say, well, look at my yardage, how many times I got into the end zone. Guys on the defensive line can say, well, look how many tackles and sacks I have. I don't know. Like, I know the PFF, they got this way of grading offensive lines, but I don't think it makes a lot of sense to the average football fan. It's just kind of not fair to say, well, I'm the best offensive lineman in the CFL. How do you prove it?
Yeah, I was graded out by PFF. I don't know if they use that in contract negotiations, but they will use sacks against to say, hey, I was part of a line that only give up how many of our sacks this season. I imagine stuff like that, stats like that go into contract negotiations. And yeah, it is the most underrated position in the league. They don't get a lot of praise. When they are mentioned, it's usually for a bad reason, right? Usually you've broken your, haven't made your block or broken something. So to me, I guess long snapper, holder would be the other two positions, and the guys who are only mentioned when it's a negative play, offensive line for sure. When they do a good job, I think a lot of people notice. And if you're a general manager, like Ben said, that's where you want to build a team. You want to have a good quarterback, obviously, but if you don't have a good offensive line, it's going to – your whole offense after that, behind that, is going to be not great, because you don't have any protection, whether it's for pass pro or for run pro. If you have a great running back and a terrible offensive line, it's not going to get you too far, right? If you have an okay running back and a great offensive line, you're going to get far. Same as Ben said for the quarterback, right? They can make a good quarterback look great. So, yeah, I would agree. It certainly is the most underrated. And I think those guys in the trenches, they feed off that a little bit, where they're going to just put their nose down and go to work. They don't need the praise. They don't necessarily want the praise all the time. They're just those sort of workhorse type players.
I love the idea of like a bizarro TV coverage world where after a touchdown pass, the cameras immediately go to the left guard who had a pancake block, and then see him celebrating like, yes, that's like the way that the quarterbacks and receivers do, or running backs spike the ball into the field. Instead, cut to that tackle eligible player who sealed the line on the end or something like that. But it's just not how the game's designed. The O-line, they're not the guys that get the medals and have the posters made of them. It's just not that kind of position. It's you're in there as a workhorse, and you're really underappreciated. And there's just not, the way the game is designed, it's not made for that sort of recognition. But yeah, it's unfortunate the stats aren't there. But at least there are some other metrics now. And I know I've heard from a number of executives talk about how PFF's numbers aren't necessarily the way that they see the play, because PFF, they do, I think, a really nice job, but they don't know what the actual assignment responsibility is on any given play. And so it's not a perfect system, but at least there is something now where you can look at that, and fans as well can see the CFL put out numbers every week, and they grade the O-lines and stuff. And it's a way for them to say, hey, our guys seem to be playing pretty well. Their numbers aren't good or this week, why, what happened? And so, at least there is that. But yeah, I do think, anything we can do to bring more attention to the offensive line needs to be done.
There you go. They're all O-linemen. You see, out of the CFL this week, we love you. We appreciate you working hard on that O-line as a big unit. Ben, to you here. In the pregame show for the Alouettes and the Ticats, I was talking to Alouettes reporter Joey Alfieri, and he mentioned to me that the Alouettes as a group, and this is the players speaking here, and Jason Moss, the leader of it, saying they get no respect from anyone in the CFL. Does this kind of motivation surprise you, seeing that they are the defending Grey Cup champs?
A little bit, if it weren't true. I think there's some truth to that. Like, they do get respect in the fact that they're generally top of the power rankings, and everyone kind of acknowledges they're playing at a level of football higher than everyone else. And so it's not that. It's just that I think people have trouble buying into the Alouettes, which is flawed, because you should buy into the Alouettes. They're a really good football team. But I think it's that, almost like the last conversation we had about O-linemen, it's the lack of visible stars, the way that teams typically put it out there. Often when you have these sensational football teams that go out there and dominate everybody, win every game, win Grey Cups, there's like 4 or 5 guys where you can look at the poster boys, the guys that you can say, oh yeah, that is the champion. This guy threw for 1 billion yards and caught all these touchdowns and everything else. And Montreal's they've got a really good team. Like, Fajardo's playing great football, but you look at his numbers last year when they won the Grey Cup, they weren't anything that would necessarily blow you away or set records. He was just playing smart football, and he went on a bit of a tear. Their O-line's been playing really well. They don't have any real weaknesses. They don't have holes. It's hard to form a game plan. It's hard to attack them. Their defense is strong. Their offense does what they need to do. They play smart football. And it's hard to get excited about that. It's hard to get excited about smart football, but they've done nothing but win football games, even when Fajardo's out. Coach Moss has shown that that's fine. You can put the number 2 and you can put the number 3 in, and they'll still find a way to win football games. It's just the mark of a really good team, top to bottom. They've built a great roster, and just because it doesn't have stars necessarily all over the place doesn't mean it's not an excellent team. It is.
That's a great point there, Ben. And like Avry, like, I don't know how many people really knew who Davis Alexander was in Hamilton and Saskatchewan. Again, a very good team the week prior. But do you believe they're getting no respect?
I'll agree with Ben's point that, to an extent, yes, because they're 7-1, and I don't see people automatically saying they should be repeating for the Grey Cup, which to me is silly. They're 7-1. They're unbeaten on the road. They could put me at quarterback and win by 20 somehow. Like, this is a good team that's not getting enough love at 7-1 and should be the favorite to repeat in the Grey Cup. What Jason Moss and company have done has been amazing, and Ben's right. There aren't a bunch of stars in Montreal, but they're finding ways to win. People love to see a star or two, a name they can easily pick on to say, hey, this guy is the Montreal Alouettes. He defines the Alouettes. They don't have that, but that's okay because they've won 7 games this season.
Okay, I hate to go here, but I have to, Taylor. Like, do you think the Francophone thing has anything to do with it? Because I've heard like Marc-Andre Dequoy, like these guys have been very, very vocal.
Yeah, and I think he spoke about it last year after the Grey Cup. But no, I don't think that has anything to do with it. I think it really just comes down to it's sort of an us against the world mentality. That a lot of people or teams sort of take that approach where it's us against the world. That's how they bond together. So I think the Alouettes have taken that approach, and they took it last year on their Grey Cup run. Even listen to Cody Fajardo's speech, right? The one that got all the attention. I obviously can't repeat it here, but Cody Fajardo's speech where it was, us against the world type of stuff. And that's how the Alouettes bonded together and were able to go on that run into the Grey Cup and win the Grey Cup. And I think the biggest thing why they're not getting respect is that they surprised a lot of people last year. And people this year are now saying, prove it wasn't a flash in the pan. Prove you're a good team year after year after year. Or was it just a flash in the pan? You go on and win the Grey Cup and surprise everybody by beating the Toronto Argonauts and then, of course, winning the Grey Cup. So are you a team that's for real or are you a team that just had 1 year of success? They've showed it this year so far that they are still a great team. They have a lot of players from last year's team that returned and are carrying on that mentality of us against the world. And I think if they go on to win the Grey Cup or at least get to the Grey Cup this year, that respect will then follow. But they're not this team that has been rebuilding, earning that respect along the way. they're just sort of this team that kind of came out of nowhere, in my opinion, last year, and have obviously continued on that route of success.
Ben Alfieri said to me, he says that he agrees with the no respect because he says, when does a defending Grey Cup champion have to start the season on the road? Generally, it says that Grey Cup rematch is in the house of the Grey Cup defending champions, and he said the league doesn't respect them.
Yeah, and then that was weird. And I don't think they had a home game for the first. They started back-to-back road games, didn't they? I think they opened the season.
Yeah, and there was nothing wrong with the stadium.
Yeah, that was. It just seemed. Yeah, everything about that seemed like they had this part of the schedule in place well before the season ended and didn't foresee this happening. Who knows? But yeah, it was a weird start to the season. But again, I think Montreal is welcoming that because as a coach, like I love being the underdog. There's nothing better than being the underdog. Being a heavy favorite with all that pressure on you is not an environment conducive to success oftentimes because you can't really win. Because if you do win, everyone expected you to. And if you don't win, then it's a big disappointment. Being the underdog, even at 7-1, Liz, Montreal is trying to fire this up. Of course they are. They don't want everyone talking about how great they are. But I think they're sort of workman style of play and the way that they win football games is probably going to allow that narrative to continue a little bit. Because even look at some of their games, like their win over Toronto at BMO Field, where they just decimated the Argos. How did they win that game? They won with 7-yard hooks. That was their plan of attack. And it's just tough to get excited about and say, what we have to do is take away those 7-yard hook plays. But that's winning football. They just patiently complete passes down the field. Eventually you get frustrated and send everybody, and then Fajardo zips it over the top to Philpott. But yeah, you try and scheme against them. Is there one thing you can take away? Like, do you take away Philpott? Does that fix the situation for you? Not really. Like, do you stuff the run? Is that going to fix it? No, Fajardo's just gonna dink and dunk his way down the field. Do you zero blitz? No, because he's going to burn you over the top with whoever. It doesn't even matter. They've got an answer for everything, and it's just really tough to take them out of their, whatever game plan they may have. They've got ways to adjust. And they're not necessarily the most exciting. It's not the Vernon Adams way of tearing it up, but it's a really effective way of doing it.
And Avery, to the other side of the football, and only because we've seen it so much here in Hamilton, and especially with the playoff losses as well too, where Matthew Schultz basically got nothing done, and by the time Bo Levi got the game was over. Yes. Noel Thorpe, his defense, they shut down the pass game, and they are so effective at doing that. And I guess going to the fact that they maybe don't get the respect, it's a Canadian Football League seen as an offensive league, that defense can win you championships.
Yeah, no, it certainly can. Only 2 teams in the CFL have allowed less than 170 points. Montreal is one of them, only allowing 168 points this season. And it's right, this is an offensive league, and I guess to an extent, at times, defense isn't sexy in the CFL, but Montreal is showing, hey, you needed to win a Grey Cup, and you need to possibly repeat here in 2024.
All right, guys, to the maybe what some people are calling one of the bigger shockers in at least the last decade. And we all saw it for our very own eyes. Ben, this is wild. What happened with Winnipeg shooting out BC 25-0, bigger surprise performance for you? The Bombers and the way they just silenced Vernon Adams Jr., or the fact that the Lions just couldn't get off the schneid?
The biggest surprise for me is the Lions. The Bombers have been playing good defense the last few weeks now. I thought you got to see them firsthand in Toronto a few weeks ago, and that Winnipeg defense is for real. I know they don't necessarily have some of those same highlights that we've seen from going back to the Rose years of all those interceptions and stuff, but this is a really disciplined Bombers defense that's tough to get yards against. The BC Lions, I love what Coach McSimic has done in scheming seemingly every week, some sort of unstoppable game plan. And so I was a little surprised that they didn't have an answer for what Winnipeg was doing, especially coming off a bye week. And so I think that has to be the focus. It's interesting that it's a few weeks in a row now where Vernon Adams Jr. hadn't really played his best football. I thought he was the best player in the league through the first 5 or 6 weeks. His play's fallen off a little bit, but I think a lot of that goes back to the offensive line conversation that we had a few minutes ago. He's not getting great O-line play, and it's limited their offense. They've become kind of one-sided. They've got William Stanback in the backfield, who I think is still a really good running back, but he's averaging 4.4 4.3 yards, 4.4 yards a carry or something like that. And that's among the lowest of starting running backs in the league. So they're not able to really run the ball. And that puts a lot of pressure on Vernon Adams Jr., who without protection is having to make it happen himself. And you can only do that for so long. He's ducking and dodging and eluding guys in the pocket before then trying to find a guy downfield. And against a good defense like Winnipeg, he just can't do it. And so some of those in the second half, BC is like rushing 3 guys and spying with Adam Bighill, and that seemed to be enough. You got 8 guys in coverage. It's really hard to come from behind in a situation like that. And so just a weird game plan, weird lack of adjustment, I suppose, from a team and a coaching staff that has been great at that over the last few years.
Taylor, I don't know if you have your power ranking or if you did any picks going into last week's games, but did you even imagine the Bombers winning this game?
No, I don't even, like I said, I have no idea what to make of this Winnipeg team because I think they did play well. So it was a little bit of them playing well, but BC obviously, I don't know what happened to them. They were supposed to be better this week. Keon Hatcher was back into the lineup. Their offensive. So the offense was supposed to get this spark with Hatcher back. They're supposed to be that much better. Vernon Adams was probably projected for another 300-yard game. And all of a sudden, they completely fall flat. 2 first downs in the first half or whatever it was. Just an absurd low statistical output from them offensively, and then VA gets hurt in the second half, and it just goes from bad to worse for them. Just 100% of the performance of the Lions was the biggest shock. Winnipeg still a decent team offensively and defensively, but yeah, to see that low output from BC, I was really excited for this game. I thought it was going to be sort of that what we saw the last few years when BC and Winnipeg went head to head. We were treated to some pretty good games this last week. Not so much. So BC was supposed to be better. They were way worse.
Avry?
Yeah, no, I think like the group has said here, I think we were all shocked to see BC put up a 0 on the board. Something that in the CFL is a rare occurrence at all. BC just couldn't get anything going. Vernon gets hurt. And Winnipeg turned back the clock. This was a Winnipeg team that we saw dominate with the defense back in 2019. This is a throwback Winnipeg performance for a team that's still trying to find their footing this year in Western Division. And for BC, I don't see it being a regular thing, but man, to see the Lions just unable to get out of first gear, that was truly a shock to me.
It had to be a shock. I mean, no one saw this with the offense and the way they have been so prolific. But you know what the crazy thing to me is, guys, is that Winnipeg scored 1 touchdown in the entire game, and the rest was all field goals. Like, this game was available, Avry, for the Lions if they had gotten hot in the fourth quarter to steal and at least get back a victory, but it just didn't happen.
Yeah, no, exactly. It wasn't a typical 25-0 win for Winnipeg. It wasn't a game in which they were just hammering the Lions with touchdown after touchdown. Yeah, right, bro. It was field goals after field goals. That's going to be a frustrating thing when you're losing by that much, and you know if you need one thing to go your way and you're back in this game, and BC got 0 breaks whatsoever on the road.
Taylor, Jake Dolegala, can he keep the ship alive or at least afloat for the Lions?
Yeah, I think he can. He's got a really good arm. He's not as mobile as Vernon Adams. He can still run and get out of the pocket. We saw it a little bit last year with Saskatchewan when he started down the stretch for Trevor Harrison and for Mason Fine when both were injured. He can win football games. And I think the biggest thing for him is not only a great defense, having to play with a great defense, but having those receivers, having a guy like Hollins, Hatcher, McInnes, who was, sort of, I don't even know where he went last week. That's a big reason why they didn't win, is the receivers didn't make plays when the ball was thrown their way. So I think, for Dolegala, if he can use those receivers and those receivers can get open, he has a great arm, and he's not a great quarterback in the CFL yet, but he's got a good arm and he's got all the tools. And if he gets help from his offensive line and his receivers, I think he can still win games for the Lions if he's forced to play.
Jake Dolegala could be in an opportunity here where if he gets any kind of semblance of pass protection, like Taylor said, like his arm is special. Going back to his time in Cincinnati, watching him just fire that football all over the place. He's one of those players that has offensive coordinators drooling because he has all the tools. but he hasn't quite been able to string it together. And maybe it's because he hasn't had that pass protection that's really kept him upright, because he's not a guy that is going to be throwing off platform and scrambling all over the place, eluding tacklers. And so that's going to be the problem. I'm actually worried about how BC is going to respond with him, not because of him, but because of the protection. Like Vernon Adams found a way to make that work somehow because Vernon's that good. But most quarterbacks can't survive when they're under pressure like that. And if Dolagala is back there waiting for these deep concepts to develop downfield with all those gifted receivers, I think he's going to take a lot of shots with that protection they're currently giving him.
I'll throw this out, guys. The guys, our friends at 3 Down Nation, are reporting that the Lions, they're actively sniffing around the league at veteran quarterbacks or at least some help, whether some guys on depth or not. Is there anyone out there, Ben, maybe you think, I think of Ottawa. I feel like they have like 4 quarterbacks there. Is there anyone that you think that, or should they even be out there shopping for a quarterback? Or is there anyone that you think that, might fit if need be?
Depends on the severe. Like we need to know. We don't really know all the details about Vernon Adams, how long he's going to be out, and all that stuff. But that if it's expected to be a really long time, and it certainly looked like it based on how he responded following the injury, then I do think they need to go and at least look around. Even if it's just looking around for a viable option at 2-3 right now, you need something there. And there are guys available, which isn't normally the situation in the CFL. Usually there just aren't other guys you can turn to. But you're right, Ottawa's got a bunch of guys you can choose from them. Take a look. Who do you want playing for you in BC? I think, we talked at the top of the show about MBT and Tre Ford. Does Edmonton feel like they can make a deal? Can BC even make that work in a salary cap situation? McLeod Bethel-Thompson that's a big contract. I don't know if you can make something like that work, but the Argos potentially could be getting a quarterback of their own back in a couple of weeks' time. Is there a conversation there? Probably not, based on last week's performance in Calgary, but there are guys with starting experience around the CFL that I think would be available for the BC Lions should they go in that direction. And I think if they're really expecting Vernon Adams to be at long term, then yeah, they should. It's a really good BC team that needs a quarterback, and they need some pass protection too. But those are more difficult problems to fix.
And Avery, I think there's they won't say it, they will never admit to this, but there has to be an amount of pressure on this franchise because you're hosting the Grey Cup. And yeah, Vernon Adams is clearly the number one guy there, but you've got to be able to impress. You want people in the seats. You want some excitement about the club. And I don't know, do you go out and get someone?
You know what? End of the day, you know what? You are 5-3. You're not. It's not like you're struggling to be at 500. It's not like you're under 500. But the pressure is on because for any team to host a Grey Cup, you want to be there. You want to win at home. So there is some level of pressure. Maybe it's not code red yet, but I'm sure in the back of their mind, I'd be thinking, maybe we need to get some insurance for Vernon just in case to ensure we can have a deep run in this postseason.
Taylor?
Yeah, I think it'll be, if Vernon Adams is out long term, I think Jake Dolagala will get a good opportunity. He was signed as the number 2 guy. They brought him in because they liked him. So he should get a shot. And if he shows well, then they'll still be a fine team like I expect him to be, because I think he is a good quarterback. If he starts losing them games or they continue to lose, the Lions will be forced to bring in a guy. I think they very well might have to sign a quarterback. I don't know what their depth practice roster looks like right now. They very well might need to sign a quarterback or bring a guy in just for a roster spot if Vernon Adams is out for a long time, just to have that third quarterback. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know their depth behind Dolagala on the practice roster. So do you bring in a guy who's maybe a rookie that you brought into camp or a guy who's more of a journeyman CFL type player, or do you try to make a splash and go get one of those guys? I think that's going to be a decision that'll come down in the next couple of weeks to see what they have in Jake Dolagala first before they start to sort of hit the panic button and try to salvage the season with another quarterback. But I don't even know if that's going to be an upgrade because sure, there's a lot of big names around the CFL, but are they still great quarterbacks and good quarterbacks? Well, they're not playing right now. A lot of these guys, aside from Bethel-Thompson, which would be a complete blockbuster CFL quarterback trade, which we don't get too often. But yeah, a couple guys out east that could be options.
Are you saying Jeremiah Masoli?
Well, and that's a name that's out there. Like, what does he have left? He's obviously, been replaced by Drew Brown as the number one guy in Ottawa. Does he have something? I don't know. And I don't imagine they go to like a Nick Arbuckle or somebody like that who has played in this league. But it'll certainly be a storyline that I'm going to be watching closely for the next few weeks to see how it all folds out over there.
I'm looking for big splash because it's the BC Lions and Amar Doman, who he's been the big splash king, right? Like he's the guy that's been behind bringing in these amazing musical acts and really making a show. And this is Vancouver's Grey Cup. BC Lions off to a good start. Like if anyone was going to, I know like Taylor's right. Like you don't typically see these, especially mid-season big blockbuster trades with quarterbacks moving around. But if there was a team that is always ready to put on a show, it's the BC Lions, and maybe they pull off something like this and find a way to make it work. But that would be exciting. I'm all for it. I'm all for storylines and excitement and chaos. I love chaos.
Well, hopefully we get some chaos this week with our selection of games. So we have Saskatchewan at Ottawa, Stampeders at Argonauts, Tiger Cats and Alouettes will complete their twin spin. And then the Lions, as we just talked about, they are in E-Town. The game of the week, Ben Grant, is...
It sounds like it's got to be Saskatchewan, Ottawa, right? Like those are both teams that are playing really good football. They somehow have these great records. I know Saskatchewan's fallen off a little bit, but it's a weird game to sort of tease as the game of the week. That sort of Shea Patterson, Drew Brown, like that's not you're not. These are not necessarily the big ticket names that you're looking for, but these are good football teams. They've proved me wrong. So I'm not, Saskatchewan I actually picked as my Grey Cup favorite preseason. So I'm not surprised by them. But I am under Shea Patterson that they've actually been playing some good football, not winning every game, mind you, but playing good football. And Ottawa I didn't think would be anything at all, and they've certainly proven me wrong. They look really good. They find a way to win. I know two of those are against the Elks, but with where they are in the standings, I don't know how you can not look at that game and say this is a big game. We got to watch this. This is going to be entertainment.
Avry, your game.
Well, my game, I'm going to go with Toronto and Calgary, the rematch in Toronto. I want to see if the Argonauts can figure out what the heck happened in the second half of the game to clean things up, because they can't collapse 2 games in a row against the same team. Can they? And also for Calgary, I want to see what they can do to try and keep pace in the Western Division with teams like Saskatchewan and BC, because if Calgary can find a way to win again, then that Western Division gets really interesting in my mind, fellas.
Taylor?
Obviously, I'm going to pay attention pretty close to the Riders Red Blacks game, but I think all 4 games offer a ton of intrigue. We've talked about all the different storylines for all of them. Obviously, Saskatchewan, Shea Patterson will need to show well in maybe his last start before Trevor Harris returns, and against a good Ottawa team on the road, trying to break a losing streak here. A lot of intrigue there. Stampeders, Argos, as Avery just mentioned, great intrigue there. Tiger Cats, Alouettes. Are the Alouettes for real? Is Davis Alexander going to continue on this magical run of going from this unknown name, or is I don't know, is Fajardo close to coming back? Who knows where he's at, right? Lions and Elks. That's another huge one we just talked about. As a fan of the CFL, I really love watching Tre Ford. I think, as I mentioned, he's a good young quarterback. He's only going to get better. So how do the Lions look if Vernon Adams is out versus the Elks? I just think every game this week has a ton of intrigue. And I don't know if we can say that every week, but this certainly is going to be a week to watch in the CFL.
I think you could say it most weeks, though. Like, I think every week, or at least most weeks this year, there's a bunch of games. I'm like, I'm really excited about this one. And that hasn't always been the case. Like, even just trying to put together my power rankings for this week. So I put down Montreal 1, and then I had no idea. I'm like, who's 2? I didn't even know 2. Usually like 1 through 5, and then you're like, okay, we can figure it out. I didn't know number 2 because it was at the BC Lions who just got decimated. Are you looking? Is it the Ottawa Red Blacks, the team that I didn't think was going to put anything together at all? So the parity here, and it's not parity in a bad way, because even the 1-7 Edmonton Elks, I think, have played some great football, and there's a lot of excitement there. But I think it's really good for the league. If anything, I think they just need Montreal to come down a couple levels, and then it's a free for all. And man, would that be exciting football? But it's been a great season of CFL football because every week there's like at least 3 games where you're like, man, I can't make plans for Thursday, for Friday, for Saturday. I guess I'm going to be at home on my couch all weekend because look at this lineup.
Ben, what would you do? I mean, we just saw Davis Alexander win a couple of games. Fajardo's off the 6th game now, and I got to believe he's getting pretty close to being 100%. Why would he come off the 6th game early? Would you start Davis Alexander against the Ticats?
Yeah, again, it depends on, I don't know where Fajardo is in that process, but it leads me to believe they could probably have even just taking him off when they did. It was weird timing, right? So taking him off when they did, it leads me to believe that he's pretty much ready to go. If they feel that he's at close to 100% health, then I think you'd go with Fajardo because he's your guy. But at least Alexander has given you some reason to think we don't necessarily have to rush. And so if they're on the fence at all, I think you dress him, you have him out there ready to go, but you don't necessarily feel the pressure to start him because I think Alexander's shown you something he's at least been hard to prepare for. So I wouldn't mind going that way another week. But again, if Fajardo's good to go, he's playing great football, get him out there.
Avry, the best part for Elks fans is that when they show up to Commonwealth Stadium this weekend, they won't have to bring a brown bag.
No, they will not. And that was a big thing against Hamilton. Yeah, there are multiple fans who had bags over their heads who were booing for much of that first half. So yeah, no, but there's going to be a lot more smiles, a lot more cheering, seeing Tre under center once again, for sure.
I hope it's just, I want to see fans in that. Like, I mean, I don't care who you cheer for, who your favorite team is, who you report for. Seeing at least what we saw when Hamilton went into Commonwealth Stadium and laid that beat down on them, to see the fans so upset and the lack of fans there in Edmonton, it doesn't seem to make right. I don't think all of us have been around in the Canadian Football League enough to know that Edmonton is one of the charter franchises, one of the proud franchises of the CFL. So, Avry, I hope there's some excitement in E-Town again.
Yeah, no, there finally really is. He's really the guy who fans want to see as the franchise quarterback going forward. I mean, this is a team that has decades upon decades of franchise-changing quarterbacks. Guys like Warren Moon, Ricky Ray, Tracy Ham, Matt Dunnigan, guys who define his franchise, and people want to see Tre Ford be that next guy.
And Taylor, this is, I think, maybe for Corey Mace, really, his first real challenge, I think, right now. I mean, he's facing some challenges. It was a great start. Even some games that maybe they didn't deserve to win. I think there was one against Hamilton. I thought that, the one here in Hamilton, the great second half. But this is his first time where I guess there are some real challenges right now to face for his football team.
Yeah, they're not panicking yet. The sky's not falling yet. They still have a good team. And when they get Trevor Harris back, they're going to be a better team offensively. They are dealing with a whole bunch of injuries, more injuries along the offensive line this past week. It sounds like Ryan Sevier is going to be out, so they need a new left guard, right? There's right tackle. I don't know what they're doing. They've gone through 2 right tackles already. So to me, it will be a response game this week, but if they lose against Ottawa, still the sky isn't falling. There's a lot of season left. They've already built up a sizable lead a sizable record to put them in playoff contention. So it'll be a big response game, but short week on the road against a good Ottawa team. If they go out and lose again, like I said, the sky's not falling yet here in Saskatchewan, although, in years past, if they went on a 3-game losing streak, the sky would be falling. There's that belief that Corey Mace has built with his players, with the fan base, that this team is going to be a contender. So if they have a bit of a blip in the season where they lose 4 of 6 or whatever it might be, it's not panic time quite yet. They're not calling for the head coach to be fired in Saskatchewan. It's kind of refreshing to have that sort of sense of confidence within the coaching staff, regardless of how their record is showing and then what they're doing, where fans aren't calling for the head coach to be fired on a weekly basis. So not panic time yet. Corey Mace this team is going to be just fine, even if there's a bit of a blip here midseason.
I think with 18 games, it's only natural there's going to be some challenges in your regular season. Final question to you there, Ben. Got to bring it up because it's been bubbling underneath the surfaces right now. Where are we with Chad Kelly right now?
Well, we got to wait and see. We haven't heard anything official. This game in Toronto this week against Calgary will be Toronto's 9th of the season, and we know that Chad Kelly was suspended for a minimum of 9 games. And so we're waiting to hear from the league. Like, is that it now? Because the Argos need to know that too, because they're going to a bye week, and then they've got Saskatchewan coming to town. They need to know in advance so that they can prepare, and so they know, is it going to be Chad Kelly? Are we waiting for longer? Is the suspension being extended? So I guess it's sort of wait and see at the moment, but every indication that I've heard from the team is that he's the starting quarterback, and so as soon as he's allowed back with the team, then he will assume that role. So I guess it's on the league now and on us being updated as to when and where the suspension ends, I guess.
Does that surprise you that if he's ready to go and he's cleared, that he starts right away?
Well, I think from a football standpoint, you'd probably want a couple of weeks. Like, he hasn't been practicing with the team, and from the way I understand the collective bargaining agreement, I believe he's actually allowed to be practicing with the team, suspended players, but he hasn't been. Toronto's kept him away, and he's been working, and he's been keeping up and fulfilling his responsibilities and his obligations as a part of that suspension as well. And so, he is the starting quarterback. He's the guy that they have invested a lot of money in, and his performance on the football field is really unquestioned, except for that one playoff game that we've vowed never to speak about ever again. But so to me, I'm not really surprised that's going to be where they go, but I think they need a couple weeks of practice time, or at least a week of practice time to get up to speed. So the sooner they find out what the situation is, the better it is for them as a club.
Certainly makes for an interesting storyline as we get closer to Labor Day. I'll tell you that much.
No kidding.
Hey, guys, great performance this week. Love your opinions, your thoughts, your injection. Just it's great stuff, and it's certainly what makes the CFL what it is. And as I say, I think it is the top. And I know I'm blowing my own horn again on behalf of all you guys and our guests. It is the best CFL podcast out there week after week. So, guys, if certainly guys want to continue the conversation and want to chat up with you. Avry, you passed the test as the rookie. Where can we find you if we want to chat with you and talk some CFL football?
I'm on the Twitter app, or the app called Twitter, formerly, well, now Extrovert it's being called now. Find me on Twitter at Avry, AVRY, all one word, and read my content on AverySports.com.
Taylor, where can we chat it up with you and talk a little Saskatchewan sports?
Yeah, anything Riderville, find me on Twitter, Taylor_Shire, and if you're in the area, you can buy a Leader Post. We still print them, still print the newspaper, so pick up a hard copy of the newspaper if you're interested in that.
Newspaper, journalism matters, folks. It's important, folks. Ben Grant, doing a great job with those Argos broadcasts. I got to listen to you to be honest, I listened to the good half of the first half with you and Mike on Sunday night with the Argonauts and the Stampeders broadcast, and was shocked on TV. And of course, you're doing a great job with your podcast as well. Where can we communicate with you if we need to talk some football with you?
The best way to get me is Twitter at Ben_Grant. And I'm always happy to talk CFL football, regardless of the team you support, because I think all of us, we want to see the league do well. And I'm always cheering for every team in the CFL. I want to see those seats filled in every single stadium. And I want people talking CFL football, regardless of the market.
Folks, if this was your first time, just like Avery, the CFL This Week comes to you every week on the Ticats audio network. That's loaded full of Tiger Cats. And yes, CFL programming as well. Hit the subscribe and thumbs up button and drop us a 5-star rating, or even a 2 or 3-star rating, because it'll make us better, folks. We really appreciate it, and of course we appreciate you. And I certainly appreciate the threesome that joined me today to talk a little Canadian Football League. Enjoy the games, folks. We'll see you next week. This is the CFL This Week on the Ticats audio network.